I'm a charismatic. I believe the gifts are for today, but I think there's a lot of charismatics and Pentecostals that go too far. Mainly because Paul also would say that they go too far. And I think that it is beneficial and healthy for the church when that gets called out, but specifically when it's a charismatic, someone who believes that the gifts are for today, calling it out. Not just people who don't believe the gifts are for today. So that's something that I do here on this channel. My name is Jesse. I was born and raised in church, and I try to do Bible teaching and also reacting to kind of social stuff, news, things that I find, and trying to give a Christian view of some of that stuff. So today we're going to be looking at a clip I saw on X, and this actually comes from an account I follow called Protestia. Now, they are, I will say, from what I've seen, I think it's pretty clear that they are cessationists. They don't believe the gifts are for today. And most of what they do is posting stuff like this. So, I think that, again, this is good. This should be called out. But I don't think it is as effective being called out by people who don't believe the gifts are for today, because then I think a lot of this is just criticized as they're just cessationists. They don't believe the gifts are for today anyway, so it's not really going to matter. So we will jump straight in. It's not a very long clip. It's only like a minute long, and we will check this out. I don't know what pastor this is, what church this is, anything like that. Anybody who is just listening, this says continuationist. We can do the exact sort of miracles Jesus and his apostles did. In fact, we can do even greater things than he. Then also continuationist, and it has this video clip. I'll try to describe it for anyone that's just listening, but I would just suggest if you just listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anything like that, I would suggest maybe just for this video even go watch on YouTube or Rumble, or I'm actually trying to post these on social media as well, so Facebook, Instagram, X, any of those. But yeah. Come. So he has this lady walk up. She was at the front. She comes like out where she's among other people, and he has her hold her arms out in front of her. So like they're almost parallel with the ground, and the angle that you're looking at looks like it's kind of hard to tell because this is being filmed from behind and to the side of her. So it looks like one arm is significantly longer than the other, but it could also just be the angle at which the video is being taken. But I think that's what's, and you'll see it here. I think that's what's being gotten at. So we'll have to, you'll see here. And yeah, so he is waving his hand in front of her hand, and basically it looks like it is making her arm grow. The length of her arm is increasing so that her hands now match in length. Okay? Now, her arms are shaking. There's someone coming up to take a picture. Okay, we're done with the video. So here here's my issue with this and things like this in general. This instantly, the first thing that comes to mind is, and I know there's going to be some people that don't like the critique here, but I'm making the video, so I'm going to make the critique. It instantly makes me think of Todd White and the leg lengthening videos that he does. I have heard multiple people make the critique that if you just watch Todd White's videos, you would think that there is some type of a massive pandemic of people having one leg longer than the other in the U.S. And he would do this thing where basically you have the person sit down and you put your hands on the back of their heels, and you can do it in a way to where it looks like their legs are different. You kind of hold it slightly to the side, and then you can do different things to make it harder to see. You can kind of move their legs and like as you're talking and kind of stuff like that. And then as you're doing this, kind of slightly turn it to where it's straight out, so then their legs will appear even. Now, I'm not saying definitively that's what Todd White was doing. To my knowledge, there's been no hard evidence that that's what Todd White was doing. I will say, however, that I do think that there's a lot of issues with Todd White. I've talked about that before. And yeah, so with this, the reason I have issue with that is because it is so easy for someone to see that and think, oh, this is fake. Like it is incredibly easy for someone to see that and just be like, nope, this isn't real, this isn't God. If you are doing this healing, if God is using you to heal this person, what's the purpose of that? The gifts are supposed to be given as a way to demonstrate that God is who he says he is, demonstrate the power of God. And so if you're doing this in a way, and I've said this about prophecy, I've said this about tongues, I've said this goes with every single gift. If you're doing it in a way that makes it easy for someone to dismiss it and discredit God, think about this. That you are using the gift that God gave to bring people to him in a way that is in turning people off from God. Now, there will be some people that will be turned off from God, and it doesn't matter how you do it. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about being above suspicion. Example of this. There was a time where there were these prophetic ministers. If you're not watching, I did prophetic in air quotes. Prophetic ministers who would go to the service, or they'd be sitting up on a stage and waiting to speak or do their whole thing, and they would pull up some type of social media or something like that and find people in the crowd and pull up information on them from their social media. Then, once they got up onto the stage, they would pass off this information that they saw on the social media as if it was a revelation from God. Now, this is... I cannot... I don't feel like I can use words strongly enough to describe how absolutely atrocious that is. At least not on YouTube. It is making a mockery of God, and it is basically knocking down God to the level of a cheap parlor trick. The gifts of the Spirit, it is equating them to a cheap parlor trick. Now, people would do this. So, Remnant Radio, I've heard them talk about this before. They actually at the time, I believe they still do it, they said, okay, we're not going to use tablets or laptops or anything like that to preach off of. You need to have physical papers, like something, a hard copy that you can't get, you can't access social media or do anything like that. So that way, there's not even a chance of someone saying, hey, this is what they're doing or this is what happened. That is taking extra steps to make it even harder for someone to discredit it, so that they see that it's God. It's like I don't have this in my notes, but it just popped in my head when Elijah was going up against the prophets of Baal. Yeah, prophets of Baal, and they're trying to call down fire from heaven and get their sacrifice lit, and they're doing all this stuff, and there's a couple hundred of them. They're like cutting themselves and doing these ceremonies and things like that, and Elijah's sitting there mocking them. He's like, maybe your God's on the potty and stuff. Like it's a funny story if you read it. Anyways, Elijah is doing this. He's mocking them, and it comes his turn, and so he tells them to pour water on his, and they poured water until the animal that he was going to try to sacrifice to God, provide as a burnt offering to God, was completely drenched, and there was a moat around it, or a trench around it, that was completely filled with water. He prayed, and God sent fire from heaven, burnt up his offering and the other prophet's offering. So Elijah wasn't just going to try to do what they were going to try to do. He made it even harder intentionally, because he knew that God was real. He knew that his God was real, capital G, God. And he knew that his God had called him to be there as a prophet in that time, and he was going to show up. He had confidence in God's ability. If you have confidence in God's ability, you do not need to go out of your way to try to make it look better, make it look more authentic. The Holy Spirit doesn't need a hype man. That's something I think Pentecostal charismatic movement gets very, very wrong a lot of the time. It is much more a seeking an emotional high, seeking an emotional reaction, instead of actually trying to find God. So the gifts are for today. I think that's clearly taught in Scripture. If you don't, that's fine. You're still a brother. That's not disqualifying. I think that you're wrong. But I also think that there's a lot of charismatics that are very wrong, and they do this wrong. And I'm willing to lock arms with anybody that's calling this out and say, yeah, they're right, and the church should be doing more of that. It's healthy. So yeah, like, comment below if you think I'm right. If you think I'm wrong, comment. Yeah, let me know how terrible I am. I get some of those every once in a while. But hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos we have coming out. And then if you look over here in this corner above my Starry Night picture, I have a playlist that is going over all just stuff like this, trying to police the charismatic movement. If that's something that interests you, go check those out. And thanks. God bless.